Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for Wolverine Bub. This was the other than the very first Procreate piece I did, this was my first time after using Adobe Sketch of doing the actual drawing in Procreate. I wanted to make sure that the whole process was recorded. So here you can see me very roughly knocking in the lines. I didn't, when I was doing the first few strokes, think I was going to do Wolverine, and then I sort of changed my mind and started giving him some qualities like how I like to draw Wolverine. So now I did like a mega rough, and then now I'm going into like another rough, just trying to tighten it more. Whenever you're unsure about, or whenever I'm unsure about the medium that I'm using, I generally like to stack the process in my favor by having lots of different attempts on the same thing just to try and hone it in. So that's why it's like a mega rough and then like a semi rough. Here I am flipping it, just making sure that my symmetry is decent, so that it, you know, looks okay. Because for those who don't know, that's like a pretty common trick, just to find out if you if your brain isn't already adjusting it as you go to sort of compensate for your mistakes. You can flip an image to sort of reset your brain, and then you all of a sudden see all of your mistakes. So now here I am going in tighter, so I guess this would be like the tight rough, trying to really figure out what all of these shapes are. You can see me doing like a little bit of shading, a little bit finer detail, and really sort of making it just as close to final without calling it final. I like drawing my Wolverine as stocky and as close to a square as possible. So he's very squat, he's very short. In the past I used to stylize Wolverine a whole lot more, and I still really like that version of Wolverine, but every now and then it's fun to do something that's a little bit more mainstream so that he doesn't look so weird to most people. So now here I am trying to actually do final inks on it, digital inks of course. So this is on yet another new layer, and I was trying out a brush. You can see the nose got built there and then it disappears all of a sudden because I didn't really like the way that brush was going. The feel was weird, so I just sort of killed that layer, tried out a different one, and now here I am working with that one. This was a really interesting learning process. I haven't gotten comfortable doing super clean inks until somewhat recently. I would say like in the last few years or so. So this was me sort of stepping into something that I've had trepidation about in the past and trying to really nail it like in a first go, which it worked out. Ultimately I'm happy with the way it was, but there's definitely a lot of stumbling points, and if you look really closely at some of the work I'm doing here, some things are drawn with confidence, and other things you'll see them like appear and disappear and appear and disappear as I'm trying to work out exactly how I'm going to do it. In fact, I forgot to review this before I started doing the recording, but I'm pretty sure I'd do something different with that sort of, you know, forehead facet that's going on there on the top left side of his head, because I just didn't like it. And if I don't actually fix it, then you'll know that I still don't like it and probably wish that I had fixed it. This was also before I figured out that Procreate had a function where you could turn off registering a paint stroke with your hand. So even though I'm doing this with the Apple Pencil, there are times where you might see an errant stroke from me failing to do a gesture properly. Well, I later found out that you can actually turn that off. Oh, here's something good where I have that big heavy neck shadow, and then I decide, nah, I'm not going to do that. That was the point where I decided that I was going to go with more of a cel-shaded look for this one. So I wanted to leave all the shadows, or most of the big shadows, to that. So anyways, I found a function where you can turn off registering your hands as a paint stroke, which ended up helping out a ton. I'm pretty sure that's in the settings that are actually outside of the app. They're part of the Apple Pencil settings, in the Procreate settings, in the setting of your iPad Pro. So yeah, that's kind of confusing and it's really buried, but I found it to be pretty useful if you find it. Oh, this is where I'm noodling in all the chin hairs. So if it looks like nothing's happening, that's because it's very small, but since it records every stroke. There I am. I just turned off my sketch layers, which sometimes the sketch actually supports your drawing, and then when you turn them off, you feel like it's naked all of a sudden. So that's what I did. And now I'm going in and I'm beefing up some of those lines that looked like they were more substantial before when the sketch was still there. Here I am. There we go. I'm fixing that forehead. I knew I was going to do that. It was bugging me now. Okay, so here we go. I turned the sketch back on because I decided that I wanted it to be a part of the final illustration. I threw a off-yellow background, off-white yellowish background in. Then I did like one master shape so that I could always use that as a selection to keep things within inside my lines. And then I start laying in the yellows of his costume, the blacks of his costume, which I decided to go with like a faded blue, and then his shoulder pads, which I just sort of, everything's pretty muted in this color scheme, as opposed to some of my pieces that are a little bit more saturated. Here we go with some 5 o'clock shadow, and now I'm just throwing in like a big, rich shadow layer that's on the warm side. I usually work with very cool shadow layers, and so I was just experimenting at this point still, and I wanted to make sure that I was trying as many things as possible. So here we are with a warm shadow layer that is pretty saturated, and at one point you'll see I just sort of knock it back a little. I take some of the saturation out of it, and I'm pretty sure I even lower the opacity just a touch to make sure that it, yep, there it was right there. So if you want to scrub back, you can see that it got knocked back there. Throw a little bit of a highlight, a big ambient highlight on the right side, and then on the left now I'm just pounding in a blue rim light because I wanted it to really show up against how warm this illustration is overall. A lot of people ask me about brushes. I use all the default brushes in both Photoshop and in Procreate so far. I find them to be more than enough for what I do. So this is all just done with like the first brush from the paint section, I believe it is. That was how the whole thing was done, and then the eraser was set to like a fuzzy airbrushy eraser. So now I'm putting like a big just sort of outline around it, a big messy painty outline, and then putting some more damage into the painting just to, you know, give it a little bit more of a hand quality. And that's it. I hope you dug it. Thanks for watching. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.